Chapter 1. The Date. He felt the dread all around him as he continuously floated in a never-ending black void. The cold, pitch-black ocean crushed him as he couldn't work his way out of the situation. His body, still and motionless, felt like a breath or a heartbeat could kill him at any moment. He didn't know how to feel about this hellish nightmare. But then, he heard a voice. It was feminine, sweet, comforting, somehow unintelligible. Then he saw it. A figure of a rather attractive woman in a long, laden dress right in front of him. He couldn't make out much more detail than that before waking up. Trevor burst from the covers breathing heavily, having a hard time believing what kind of dream he had. He didn't know why he had this nightmare or why it put him into such a shock, but what he did know was that it was time to wake up and get ready for work. He stood up from his bed and made his way to the bathroom. Trevor took a shower, got dressed, and made his way to the kitchen. Shortly after getting a bowl of cereal and some toast, he picked up the newspaper that was delivered to his door just that morning. He read an article about how a hospital from a town over had lost all of its equipment and windows due to a freak accident. While the cause of this is still unknown, what happened was that it seemed like every object crumpled into small balls of scrap, and every window exploded all at once. This event left dozens killed and hundreds injured. Apparently, no one knew what could have caused such a travesty or why it happened. There were a few doctors who gave remarks. The one who was the most interesting was Dr. Marcus Runnis. He made a remark about losing a patient due to a coma just before the event. He had a feeling that it could have been connected, though the journalist that wrote the article stated that this sounded crazy. Trevor thought about this statement and understood what the doctor meant. Sometimes when events happen back to back from each other, you can't help but feel like you made a mistake that caused the other event to happen. Trevor thought about it harder and then came to the conclusion that it would be ridiculous to associate the two together. After breakfast, he put his bowl and plate into the kitchen sink and got some of the things that he needed for work and headed out the door. Before he did, he saw a reminder that posted on the door that he had a date tonight. He remembered who he was dating, a girl named Jenny Darfield. She was a sweet girl that worked at the coffee shop that he usually stopped by at. Oftentimes, he'd get the shortest straw at work and had to be the one to get the coffee ordered filled. But this is how he met Jenny. She was always one of the nicest workers there and always treated him extra special even if he felt like he didn't deserve it. One day, they met at a local grocery store. There he found the courage to ask her out. He would never forget the words that she said next. "I was wondering when you were going to ask that." It was almost a shock to him to hear that. While he wasn't an avid believer at love at first sight, it happened to him all the same. But something about this made him feel nervous. He parked his car in the parking lot outside of the building. He was grateful for the fact that he didn't have the coffee run today. He walked into the building, clocked in, rode the elevator up to the floor, and sat down in his cubicle. His job was not glamorous. Sometimes he had to answer some stupid tech questions for some people who didn't know any better, but the majority of it was spent on paperwork. Lots and lots of paperwork. He never remembered the details of most of it, majority being signed a line at the bottom. It was a job that didn't really make much sense to him. However, his mind was elsewhere today, like focusing on that date that he had that night. What he was going to wear, what he was going to say, what he wanted to ask her. It was comforting, despite the fact that, well, the thought made him nervous. Thinking of anything was better than thinking about his BS job. After work, he went home to get a shower so he could smell nice. He didn't get paid enough to get a super fancy suit. He pulled out the nicest collared shirt that he could afford, a cheap clip-on tie, some nice black pants, and put that on. Shortly afterwards, he got back into the car and drove down to the location of the date. He was early enough to stop by a local flower shop and pick up some flowers. Even if they were not cheap, he was trying to leave a fantastic first impression. He parked in front of the restaurant about 15 minutes before the meeting time. He took a deep breath to calm his nerves. Every once in a while, he found himself muttering, "Just be yourself, man. Be yourself." This thought didn't comfort him much, since he didn't have much going on in his life. Sure, he has a college degree, but if all that does is land you a dead-end job, then what good is it for making any kind of impression? Trevor felt like perfection was the best way to go with this. If everything was perfect with this date, he could win her heart. But he looked at the restaurant and felt something turn in his stomach. Of course it wouldn't be perfect. There was going to be a hiccup somewhere, and he knew it. He looked at the clock at the dash of his car. 5 minutes. He picked up the flowers and made his way out of the car. He walked towards the front of the restaurant where the lights inside showed it, bustling with life, the windows of people enjoying their meals and waiters delivering food. He walked up to the door and waited. The smell of Italian food in the air got him good. He was getting hungry enough to get kind of sick. Then, a familiar voice cut through the noise emitted from the restaurant. "Trevor, you're looking good tonight." He looked in the direction of the voice and almost forgot where he was for a moment. Jenny looked stunning that night, with a beautiful emerald dress slightly clinging to her side, showing a little curve. Her long brown hair reflecting the light from the windows, her brown eyes shimmering so bright that even stars started to fade. She was wearing makeup, just enough to complement her face. There was really no words to describe her besides astoundingly beautiful. "Hi, Jenny," Trevor said nervously. "Here, I got you this." He handed the flowers to Jenny. Her face lit up even more after he handed her that. She wasn't expecting this. A good time and possibility of a boyfriend, but not a straight shot to the heart. She took the flowers blushing, her right foot slightly moving in the dirt. "Thanks," she said shyly. "Do you want to escort me to my car so I can put them there?" Trevor nodded and walked her to her car. On the way back, they started talking like they were old friends. They walked into the restaurant and got sat down. They ordered some wine since they both felt like having a romantic drink. They looked over at the menu and decided what to order. After having their order taken, their conversation got a little more personal. They talked a little bit about their past. Jenny said that she was born in a city along the west coast. Her family moved more inland when the cost of living in the city on the coastline got too expensive. She mentioned that she was quite the art enthusiast, and she did that as a hobby until someday she could make money off of it. According to her, she takes greater inspiration off of some of the territory up north. Trevor made a remark about himself considering that he lived in the central states all his life. Both were taken away by the idea of maybe taking some time off and headed up north to stop by most, if not all, the popular destinations on the way. Once they got to this point, their food came to the table. While something looked kind of off with the chicken Alfredo they both got, neither one of them noticed. They were too busy looking into each other's eyes, daydreaming of the road trip that they could take together. Of course, they started eating shortly after the waiter was gone. While both Trevor and Jenny kept their talk small so they can enjoy their food, Trevor started to feel a knot develop in his stomach. He had to excuse himself while he rushed into the bathroom. He flew into the only toilet stall there was and proceeded to throw up. After heaving up half a plate of Alfredo and 2 breadsticks, he thought to himself, food poisoning. He took a look at himself in the mirror and noticed that some of the vomit got on his nice shirt and tie. After seeing this, he knew he couldn't carry on with the day. He washed off whatever he could and made his way out of the bathroom. He wanted to tell Jenny that he wasn't feeling good, but she wasn't there. He felt so disheartened by having this strong feeling that she went home. A date ruined by food poisoning. And she was a great one, too, he thought to himself as he paid the bill. When he got home, he took off the vomit-soaked clothes and took a shower and headed off to bed. On a night like that night, after an experience like that, sleep would be very hard. But it seemed easier than ever to get some sleep that night, and a deep sleep if that. However, when he woke up, he was not in his bed, but on a couch. He got up and looked around, shortly realizing it. Nothing in the room was his. A wave of panic almost swept over him. He would have screamed if it wasn't the sweet, smoky smell of breakfast being cooked in the kitchen. He wandered in the direction of the smell, only to find someone at the stove. She had chromatic black hair that glistened in the light and hung down to her waist. He also noticed her long, rosy dress that exposed the pink slippers that she was wearing. Then there was her humming. It was the type of hum that a songbird would hum if it could. The melody, however, was like a lullaby that would get haunting if it was repeated enough times. Then she turned around. What stood before him was what some would call a dream girl. Her face was something only an angel could make. Her sapphire eyes had a gemstone-like sparkle to them. Her lips gently lined her face with a deep cherry color to them. He took a look at the rest of her body and noticed how curvy this girl looked. It's a slightly less exaggerated Jessica Rabbit, to put it bluntly. "Well, I was wondering when you were going to wake up, sleepyhead. Did you have a nice sleep?" she said with a flirtatious giggle. Somehow her voice was smoother than silk and sweeter than honey. Trevor almost wasn't able to respond to that. He was caught up in between two responses. But after he got himself straightened out, he finally responded, "Yes, I did. Where am I?" She started to laugh. "Oh, you're in my house, silly." She slowed down the laughter and started sounding very flirtive. "Handsome and a sense of humor. I like that in a man." He still had questions to ask, but understanding the situation, Trevor went with the most important ones. "Okay, so how did I get here, and who are you?" She closed her eyes and leaned back a bit, but a smile was still on her face. "I guess I do owe you some explanation." She drew a deep breath like she was preparing for a long-winded explanation. "I'm Elizabeth, and I found you—" There was a slight hesitation there. "Out in the middle of the woods." Trevor knew that this explanation seemed off since he was in his house when he went to sleep. But if he did sleepwalk, it would have been a long walk. Though he didn't feel like calling out Elizabeth for lying, so he rolled with it for now. "Okay, but why would I be in the woods?" Trevor asked in response. Elizabeth smiled. "Well, there are lots of reasons why people go out into the woods. Some go to observe, others go for an adventure. People can just go to get away from something, like a botched date." Trevor had a red flag go up in his brain with that last statement. However, his thoughts were quickly interrupted by the growling of his stomach. "Oh, you poor thing. You must be hungry. Here, have a seat at the table and I'll serve you up some breakfast." Trevor was not going to deny any food right now, since he was hungry. Cautiously, he made his way to the table and Elizabeth turned around and got a plate from the cupboard. He sat down while she loaded it up with French toast, bacon, and eggs. When she placed the plate gently down in front of him, he had to restrain himself just from picking up a fork and diving in. Everything placed in front of him looked and smelled like heaven. It was a surprise for him to see her come back with some butter, syrup, a glass of milk, and a small glass of orange juice. He prepared his food by buttering the toast, pouring syrup on top, and putting a little pepper on his eggs. It was hard to explain why, but it was the best French toast he had in his life. The bacon had an avidly sweet and savory taste to it, where the smoky taste would just melt right into your tongue with every crunch. His eggs were light and fluffy, while being seasoned to perfection. He didn't understand how he got the right amount of pepper on those eggs, but he didn't really question it either. Drinking the orange juice was like drinking an early morning sunbeam. It could have been like if the oranges were freshly picked that morning just for this juice. And the weirdest part was that this juice never went sour after having the French toast. The milk was just milk. There was nothing much more to report on there. After breakfast, he started feeling sleepy again. He was going to think something until Elizabeth said something. "Oh, you're still tired, you poor thing. I figured putting you on the couch would result in you losing some sleep. How about you crash on my bed? You'll get better sleep there. And I would come along and cuddle you after putting things away." Trevor felt uncomfortable about this. He wasn't sure how to react to this. "Well, thanks, but I'll just stay on the couch for now." "Are you sure about that? It's an awful big bed and I really get lonely sleeping in it. It'd be nice to have some company from a sexy man, such as yourself." He took a good long look at her and thought, "I am sure any man would not want to leave you lonely." But after that thought, he saw her smile. "Well, I would need more time to warm up to you, that's all. And I'm not sure if I would be staying once I woke up. I have work to go to. I've already missed a day. I hope you understand." After saying this, she had a smile on her face and a glint in her eye. Everything in the way she looked then said, "That can be dealt with." After observing that, he went back to the couch and made himself comfortable. Again, sleep came to him fast, but when he awoke, he was back in his own bed, in his own bedroom.